Well, good morning, and thank you very much for joining us. It's an auspicious day because today we have a special guest in the person of, well, before I tell you the person, if I tell you what we're going to be talking about today, you begin to get an indication. We're going to be talking about how we are fixing the education sector in Nigeria. And I guess the person who knows the most about that right now is no other than the Minister of Education, Professor Tahir Mamman, and we'll be joining him in his office live this morning. Okay, a fine morning to you, Professor Tahir Mamman.
Good morning.
Thank you very much.
Having me.
Our pleasure. Our pleasure. We were trying to establish all those things. This is Yori Folani in studio. Delighted to have you as our guest, sir. Okay.
Thank you. My pleasure to hear.
Indeed. Well, as I was telling our viewers, we'll be learning what it is that we are doing to fixing the education sector in Nigeria. And I imagine that it does need fixing in the sense that a 2022 UNESCO report, but you would know best about these things, actually has stated that up to 20 million Nigerians are out of school. If that is indeed the case, then it does need fixing, and we're glad that we have you. The aim is 26% of the budget for education purposes. I don't know if that is possible. So at this stage, I'll just be quiet and listen to informed commentary from you, Honorable Minister. So how are we going about fixing the education sector in Nigeria?
Thank you very much. Good morning, viewers and other audience. Now, the starting point is to appreciate that education is actually the nerve of any country. It is the main vein through which that country survives. So if we have a good education system, and we have good graduates coming from out of the schools, then that will assure the progress and development of that country. And if we don't, then that's a very serious problem. And that's why developed countries, America, UK, Canada, they invest so much in importing brilliant, talented people into their countries because they know the importance and centrality of education. For us, particularly as a developing country, it cannot be anything less. In fact, we need more of appropriate education system that will assure quality at all the levels, that will assure relevance at all the levels, and then that will assure research and innovation, and that will assure, harmony between our environment and learning. So these are some of the major things that we have to grapple with. We all know as a fact that after independence, we had a very good education system. The regions were not many at that time, just about 3, but we had a very good education system at that time. It wasn't large, but it was acknowledged to be very good. But over time, the system, of course, grew rapidly because of demands of the population. And so as it grew, I think we have not been able to manage that growth very well, even though it's very important for people to have access to education because, as the President has constantly said, it is very empowering. It's the most important tool that assures power and capability to people for people to be able to have meaningful livelihood. But somehow, I don't think we're able to manage that process very well. We allowed it to grow very unwieldy and without control over the quality of the education. So when we came into the system as the minister, and graciously appointed by the president to manage this sector, the first thing we did was to try to understand what was on the ground, and we took our time to do that, and then we now developed a roadmap that would guide our journey in the sector, bearing in mind its importance. And then the presidency as well also developed a set of deliverables, of course, for every ministry, for every minister, and including the education sector. And so that's what we are delivering. And for us, we've come to understand that the starting point is for us to focus mainly on the foundational aspect of education. We have 3 levels in the education system: the primary up to the basic education system, the secondary school, and then the tertiary, which comprises polytechnics, the universities, and colleges of education. And now, from my own experience, you know, having been at the tertiary level for over 30 years, yeah, there's some level of control and direction at that level, even though we still have a lot to do there. But we have what is called a learning crisis at the foundation level, at the primary and secondary school levels. Those levels need a lot of attention. And those who proceed to tertiary level are not more than 20%. So we have the 80% of the population of students in Nigeria, you know, at that level. And now, if they don't proceed, you ask yourself the question, what happens to that 80%? Where are they? Where are they? Are they meaningful members of the society, or are they just all over the place wandering, you know, without education, without training, or without skills? That's a fundamental question to ask always. And so that's why for us, it's very important for us to go back to the basics and then take a further bearing, take a look at that, what we need to do at that level. And so what we have done here, what we have done is to say, look, there is a trajectory which is set out actually in the Education Minimum Standards Act of 1985, which is supposed to guide the development, progressive development of every child as he enters school from at the pre-tertiary, pre-primary level, right into primary, basic education, and then secondary school, and then the tertiary level. Well, unfortunately, that trajectory has not been followed. So what we are trying to do now is to see that we start from that foundation level. Of course, not everything can be done at that level. Yes, please.
Minister, could I come in there, please? You said that when you arrived, necessarily you had to evaluate what you met, what the lie of the ground. And from some of the things you have also said, maybe I just wanted to be clear about it. Has it been your personal finding as an expert in the field of education that the quality of education in Nigeria has fallen? Because scholarship, we used to be proud of our scholarship. Even till date, there are, you know, instances where Nigerian scholars excel, but at the foundational level that you were mentioning just now, this figure, very worrying figure, this UNESCO report figure of 20 million Nigerian kids that need to be in school, not being in school, is that something of a crisis?
It is something definitely to worry about. Now, talking about figures, officially what we have is about 10.2, 10.5 million people who are now out of school. UNESCO, World Bank talks about 20 million. So there are all these things about figures and percentages. flying all over the place. We are also, that's one of the other things that we are going to address, the issue of data on the education system is one of the things we have set out to address. Right now, we have set out our policy to do a census of all schools in Nigeria, both private and in the public sector. And we also want to generate data on all teachers in Nigeria to know not just the number, but their background, their teaching support, the development support, training support they are getting, and then all the learners. We are also going to generate data on all the learners in this country, from primary school right through all other levels. And it's only when you have that information, people know exactly how many you have out of school. How many girls are out of school? How many boys are out of school? Where are they across the country? Which zones and states, are worst affected? And then when you come to schools, when you have data on your schools, you're able to know the sufficiency of the schools, the conditions of the schools, the learning facilities in the schools, and then their proximity to each other. And then whether once a child finishes from basic secondary school, JSS 3, there is sufficient secondary school for them to proceed to their SS. So you need that information to be able to intervene when you want to intervene. And then the teachers, as I have said again, you need to know the number of teachers you have, their profiles, whether they are actually qualified to teach as teachers, and if they are qualified, what continued professional development they are supposed to have, including, of course, their welfare and that sort of thing. Because education and society is very dynamic, so they need to be supported, they need to be motivated. So we are reviewing the existing policy on teacher development to ensure that it is suitable, it is for the purposes of providing necessary education in the country. And the teachers also need to be supported with digitization skills so that they can bring technology in their teaching. This is the current situation in the whole world. And then even because of the size of Nigeria, technology is very important to deliver in education. So we have a whole raft of policies that are coming up to support teachers' development and training. And that's why right now we have established smart schools in every state of the Federation, so that to aid the technical skills of teachers to deliver through the use of technology in the classroom. And we are going to expand further from states to senatorial zones and probably down the road even to local governments, this type of schools. But we are also supporting them even from here through the ICT Directorate of the Ministry to give them that training in the use of technology in the classrooms. So these are some of the things we are doing in terms of the teacher development and as part of, but we need the data. We need the data. That's what we have to have.
And that is a work in progress right now. That is a work in progress now.
Oh, yes, it is. It's one of the pillars, the 4 pillars. Right now, the ministry has developed 4 encompassing pillars, and data generation is one of them. And as I said, on all these parameters or these indices that I have just mentioned, on schools, and these schools include both public and private. We need to know all right. These schools, their conditions, what they have, their facilities. And because if you look at a lot of governors and governments, they concentrate on schools within the state capitals. But looking further afield in the rural areas, you'll find the schools are in a very terrible condition. They are not, they don't have the learning facilities. They are far from each other. So by the time we have that information.
I beg your pardon, Minister. That immediately brings us to the issue of funding. What is your impression of the allocation from our budget to education? Because all these things, you said you're establishing assets in every state of the country, bar none. Of course, the objective is, the ideal case scenario would be 26% of the national budget. I'm sure you don't have that. When I say you, we as Nigerians, we might not have that. Or do we? And how is this paucity of funds relative to the size of the task that you have? How is it impacting it?
Well, certainly we can do with a lot more money. The president has increased the budgetary allocation to the ministry, and then we have other intervention agencies like UBEC, like TED Fund, which are supporting us. But the size of the problem is such that, honestly, even if we have half of the budget of Nigeria, we can still do with more. But the most important thing about money is not the quantum of the money. It is the deployment, how it is utilized. You can have 1 trillion if it is not utilized, if there's no proper plan for its usage and it is not efficiently utilized, then you will get the result of probably for 1 million or 2 million. For us, and from my own personal experience, I have planned, I like to get so much with very little. And what I have, I try to maximize its benefits. You channel it into the properly, and then you will have a good result. So that's what we are doing in the ministry. And it's not so much about the money, which is as important as it is, but it's about having the right ideas and channeling your resources towards that. And that's why the issue of data is so terribly important. Yes.
On that point, Honorable Minister, this whole matter about the right idea and, so to speak, putting round pegs in round holes in the education sector, it is known that the educational terrain is not uniform across the country. Perhaps it is different, the needs, requirements, investments, and infrastructure and all of that in the southern part of the country will be different from the northern part of the country, for example. Could you comment on this and how, especially in the northern part of the country, with a more or less a different educational setup and system, what the difference will be as you proceed? Because you did say that every state, bar none, is being touched by this initiative.
Certainly, there are variations across the country in the facilities available, and even in the attendance of schools, commitment to school attendance of schools, enrollment, and all that. There are variations. But at the moment, what we're doing is a guesswork. It's a guesswork. You hear, for instance, that in the southeast, the problem is boys not going to school. In the north, it is girls not going to school. And then, so that's why the issue of the data is so terribly important. Right now, we are intervening together with the development partners here and there on various aspects of what is seen to be weaknesses in the system in the various zones. But of course, some of the problems are very uniform. In terms of the quality of learning at the basic education level, the problems are uniform. So what we are doing at the moment is that we are intervening on all those issues right across. But specific interventions will come up when we have the necessary data. We'll be better informed when we have the necessary data which we are working on. But right now, if I may probably mention the other program that we are bringing on board, which is bringing skills, taking skills to the schools, right from the primary school, right through secondary school, and of course the tertiary education level. Now, skills come with a lot of things because we have realized that that is actually the issue right across the world now, that simply allow people to graduate with basic knowledge is not enough, because not everybody goes on to graduate at the tertiary level So when students, learners have some skills at the secondary school level that they finish school with, they can have a meaningful livelihood, at the end of their career, either at the basic education or secondary school level. And that was what the system was in the 60s and 70s when we had comprehensive schools. You will have in that school a section on commerce. You will have in that school a section on carpentry, and all sorts of things, in addition to the general comprehensive knowledge. So when students leave school, you find they have exposure to some form of skills. And so that's part of what we want to bring back now to our school system. And as you know, there are varieties of skills now.
Sorry, Minister. Can I take it then that you are working on establishing more vocational and technical schools in addition? Certainly. Right now we have, in all the states, we have actually established vocational schools. There are also technical and science and technical schools which are supposed to generate students with that particular background. But beyond that, even the conventional schools, we want to have skills in them, embedded in their programs, right from the beginning of their studies in primary schools, right through their secondary schools. Those technical schools are different. That's what they are set up to do. But even in the normal conventional schools, we want to bring in skills into the system. And when you have skills, it makes learning interactive at that stage. It's not just the teacher going to the school, sitting there and telling them what to do. No, it becomes very involved, very interactive, because they will now learn a lot of things which they can now go out to practice, which, and of recent, we have seen the effectiveness of this approach, because there is a program which we are running with the World Bank, the Agile program. It's a program for the development of, specifically for girls, but it's also benefits boys who are in those schools. Where skills are a component of the training they receive from that school. And we've seen them making shoes, making bags, and all sorts of things. And we've seen enrollment increase in such schools because the students and their parents become very interested and excited about their children being able to come home with certain things that they have done physically in school, and which can actually be commercialized, from which the family can make some money. And so we want that, as part of the skills, part of the training and school system in every school in the country. And so we have already put in place, developed a national skills policy. Right now, what we are doing now is to populate. We have a committee working with some agencies to populate that framework with the various skill sets that are necessary for each level of education, from primary basic education to secondary school, so that by the time we are done with it, every school in Nigeria, be it public or private, will now have to go through that system, so that in this way our children will have been prepared to be able to stand on their own, even when they don't proceed to higher education for their studies. Okay.
And then, of course, we have the National Council of Skills. Yes, please.
Yeah. Okay. There are other matters I wanted to ask you, but I think I'll have to defer that to when we come back from break. I wanted to ask you about your efforts at incorporating technology. This is 2024, incorporating technology into our education. That will be when we come back from the break. Please stay with us.
The Inspector General of Police has met with senior officers to review the state of security.
We are continuing our coverage of the arrest of Godwin Emefiele.
The Senate has summoned the governor of the Central Bank of Nigeria to properly brief the Senate regarding the state of the economy.
President Bola Tinubu has announced the total removal of fuel subsidy.
The fresh subsidy is gone. What I will never take is threat.
Let's now bring you more development from Ibadan, the Oyo State capital, where an explosion has taken place. Tell us about this incident.
TVC News, first with breaking news.
Okay, welcome back. And our special guest this morning is Professor Tahir Mamman, Minister of Education. And he's talking to us about efforts of the administration at fixing the education sector. It goes without saying that it does need fixing, and the minister has been telling us about efforts. He's spoken, if you haven't been with us from the beginning, about the crucial importance of statistics, data, and that, he said, is a work in progress. The minister has been talking about other areas that they are sort of keeping a close focus on. And in that connection, as I said, I wanted to ask you what your ideas are in the ministry about incorporating technology into education to increase the digital literacy of our students.
Thank you very much. Technology is very central to us and, of course, to the country and any educational system at this age and time. For the younger generation, these are natives of technology. They take very little efforts to, in fact, you don't even take technology to them. They are actually part of technology. So for us, is to channel that skill and that curiosity into the education system. And this is what we are already doing. And first of all, as I said earlier on, we have established in all schools at the moment smart schools, where teachers will train and they have the opportunity to also to use technology in the classrooms. And every school, every state, we are expanding that. We are going to expand it to senatorial and possibly even local governments and right across before it goes into more schools. Then secondly, so digital skill is essential part of the school system already. And the curriculum, we are reviewing the curriculum of the schools, even primary schools, the curriculum of the schools, from primary to secondary schools, to incorporate the use of technology in all aspects of the classroom experience and delivery. And then, you remember, even during the COVID time, which has actually even been strengthened now, we use technology from the ministry here to train about 35,000 teachers. And right now, that's what we are doing to bring teachers on board to have the digital skills so that they take it to the classrooms. And if I may tell you, there's a very, very good, as I said earlier at the beginning, technology is native to our students and their classes now. Our students won the #1 slot in robotics competition in about 4 West African countries. Right now, and then we have about 18 of our students going to the USA, for a similar competition, having succeeded in Nigeria in series of intercontinental international competitions. Right now, about 18 of them are going to US to participate, to continue with their participation in that competition. So technology is already a very central part of our program, and we are working with the Ministry of Communication and Digital Technology and the Ministry of Communication, Science and Technology very closely to incorporate some aspects of AI, robotics, and some of the digital skills which are necessary and current, to incorporate them in the curriculum. And so technology is something that is already native to the ministry. It's a tool that we are using as a tool, and we are using it as a knowledge, to prepare our students for the present and the future.
Indeed. And in this regard, Minister, could you talk to us a bit more, please, on updating the curriculum to align with current societal needs? These are different times. You've touched on that. So the curriculum, we often have a situation where we've heard from even some tertiary institutions where the technical libraries are outdated. So we hear from the students. But since you spoke about updating the curriculum, it will be interesting to hear how thorough you think that work is being, the rate at which it is proceeding. How thorough do you think it is in order to align us with current needs, which are totally different from when Nigeria was really ruling the waves in the 50s and the 60s, maybe even 70s in education and scholarship?
Well, thank you very much. There are resources. There are more resources now online than actually even the physical resources, and we have invested so much in it. Nigeria universities have invested so much in it, and then the ministry is also invested so much in electronic resources. So that's what is needed. That's what we are doing at the moment. Millions and millions of resources are out there in electronic format for the use of students, and it's only of recent TEDFON launched. We launched a program here developed by called TERAS, which is a digital platform that allows millions of students in tertiary and even below tertiary institutions to have access to electronic materials right up from all over the world. And there are some other very robust digital resources which we are making available, to schools and institutions. So we are investing so much, even in our budget this year. The budget on e-resources for all schools, secondary schools and the other levels of schools is billions. And so we recognize the value of these resources that will be available to students and teachers. So much is being invested in that. And then the curriculum we are reviewing, it also captures some of these things. Curriculum is a very dynamic document. It's not supposed to be static. And so only of recent, the ministry launched a new revised curriculum for secondary schools in Nigeria, and the ones also for primary schools is underway. Policy and some form of curriculum for primary schools is also underway, is currently being reviewed to ensure that we bring the entire education system to the current needs of the country. And you remember the controversy about history one time when, unfortunately, it was dropped out of the courses being offered at secondary school level. This has long been brought back and as a compulsory course. And in fact, at some point, there was even a shortage of teachers in history because of that problem. Now we're able to train more teachers now through the technology, through electronic resources. And so we have enough of them to be able to handle that subject. And the training was really carried out from the ministry online, to generate enough number of teachers to handle that. So the ministry has invested so much on technology, both as a ministry and in the schools. And right now, we also have TEDFON, working on learning hubs in all the polytechnics in Nigeria, so that we have a very robust system for innovation, for the students at that level, and it's both for innovation and skills development in all those schools. Coming back again to the issue of skill that I mentioned. The same thing in the university. We are supporting the universities on to set up innovation centers so that we can contribute meaningfully. Our scholars are doing so much already, but they still need a lot of support so that they don't have problems with current and technology-driven resources to be able to conduct their researches and connect with the rest of the world in those particular areas they are doing their researches. And I have seen some breakthrough researches across. The only missing link is off-takers. We don't have industries in Nigeria. Unfortunately, our people, we don't have off-takers of products of researches for them to become products in our country. And in the next weeks and months, I think this is what the National Council of Skills will be working on to ensure that such researches in the institutions, see the light of the day in terms of products in our country. And so these are the kind of things that we are focusing on to ensure that we are very current and we are in our researches, and our scholars are also producing relevant researches for the development of our country, because like anywhere else, scholars and researchers are actually the path to the development of any country. And so we want to see that handshake between industry and our institutions, and so that we don't have to import so many things into the country. If they are working together, we'll be able to produce a lot of things for the development and use in our country.
Yeah, since, before we even get to this level of education you've just spoken about, I'd like to return to the foundational level once more. Your efforts at improving access and quality in rural and remote areas, one, and then making it worth the while, that is incentives for teachers to actually go to such areas. So if we have children in these far-flung remote areas, oftentimes it is thought that they might have been neglected. I'm sure it must be on your mind as to how to improve access and quality and teachers in those areas. Tell us about that, please.
Well, access and quality to education is a very central theme for the country. And actually, even the international community, that is what the SDG 4 is all about, the Agenda 2030, on education. This is very central to it. So it's extremely important for Nigeria to be able to achieve on that agenda. And as I said at the beginning, it's very important for us to have our children, particularly those in the rural areas, to be able to access education. And the key problems, the major issues which facilitate that is to have schools close to them, to have schools that are suitable, that is, they have the right, create the right environment within those schools, have suitable learning resources in those schools, have teachers who are motivated. And so in many places, some of these factors are problems. There are problems because the schools are a bit further away, and then teachers are simply not there in their numbers or even in terms of their qualifications. So we are working with the governors and encouraging the governors. You remember, schools at that level actually are essentially owned by the schools. But because of the problems which have bedeviled them, it has become a national issue. And the federal government, necessarily have to come in through the law that requires the federal government to set minimum standards. And of course, as you know, it's a constitutional requirement anyway for every child to go to school. It's a compulsory level of education for everybody. So the federal government is driving the process to ensure that there is access. Sorry?
I said, and then encouraging teachers to go to such far-flung, remote environments.
Yes. It's a very serious issue because if you don't incentivize them, then it becomes a problem. The environment is problematic, and then the motivation is simply a problem. So that's why we have some kind of policies on teachers training and support, where there are incentives for those posted to the rural areas. But unfortunately, the implementation of this policy has not been full, and so we are revising that, looking at that to see how that can be strengthened and then fully implemented. This is one of the things that we want to achieve. You remember I mentioned 2 pillars now. The third one now is the teachers' support and development. We are taking that very seriously because no matter the policies you come up with, if your teachers are not well motivated, they are not well trained, and they are not supported, you are not going to deliver on all those core values, objectives that we have set out. So this is
Honorable
one of the
Minister, I beg your pardon for interrupting you, yes, Honorable Minister, but at this stage, the nature of our program is that we also allow viewers to call in, and they will say I've greedily used up most of the time, but Ada is waiting on the line. Ada is in Jos. Good morning. Good morning, Ada in Jos.
There is a direct correlation between education and development. This explains why it's difficult for a nation to rise above its human capital. Therefore, there's a need for qualitative education. The problem we have in Nigeria is not just the formulation of policies. Even our curriculum is not even the issue. Sometimes we have a very good curriculum, everything is built into it, but then implementation is an issue, you know. So then we have some policies that are a bit funny. For instance, the school feeding program. I'm not against school feeding program, but I'm against where this feeding is done in an environment that is not conducive for learning. And then at the end of the day, feeding is taking place and learning is not taking place. So it doesn't make sense as far as I'm concerned. Then another major problem again we have in education, apart from the poor budgetary allocation for education, corruption and politicizing it. You know, we can't continue like that. And we should emphasize this idea of thinking that it is when you get to the tertiary level. The most important one is the primary and secondary. If we get it right at that level, by the time somebody is finishing, a student is finishing in the secondary school level, the person will be equipped with skills and can be self-employed and what have you. In some of the advanced countries, more than 50% of their population don't go to the tertiary level because they have this skill acquisition and the rest of them, vocational education, inbuilt from primary school. It's not like that.
All right, thank you very much, Ada. We'll let the minister comment on, your contribution. Thank you very much, Ada, for calling in. Minister?
Well, I agree with you. You know, you can have a very beautiful curriculum, policy, and then falter in implementation. But for us in this government, this is the gap that we have come in to fill. All our policies, we insist they must drop. They must come down to the practical level. And so that's what we are going to do to ensure that every policy that we come up with is something that has to be implemented, and we'll put in place a scheme that will ensure that they are implemented. And of course, a lot of times we are really very cynical because of years of failures and all that, but this government is about implementing policies. And I can assure you for certain, that's the direction we are heading. That's what we want to achieve. And that's why at the beginning I mentioned this thing about data, because the data helps you to put the spotlight on where the problems are and where you can intervene without wasting resources. You have very limited resources, so a lot of times in the past we've been beating about in the bush, in the dark, and people focusing on issues in isolation. Agencies and ministries, operating in isolation. Once you have information, you will know the pattern, the trends, and the weaknesses of the system. You cannot intervene appropriately, channel your resources appropriately for maximum impact, and that's what this ministry is now set to do.
Okay, I got to bring on. I beg your pardon, Minister. I beg your pardon. I really forgive me, Minister, for interrupting you. But another caller came on board. Good morning, Mr. George.
Good morning, Uncle Yari. Good morning to the Honorable Minister.
Yes.
Honorable Minister, sir, I want to speak on the question of the student loans scheme that is coming up. we know that the president means well. He wants the average family in Nigeria for their children to have education. But I have some worries about it. Whether the scheme will reach the actual people that the president wants it to reach. I'm saying this because of one example. In the past, immediate past administration, the Minister of Labor, who is now the Minister for Aviation, that's Festus Keyamo, had a program that wanted to give jobs to 20,000 people in every local government in Nigeria. He was in a battle with the National Assembly members. They insisted that they must have their own allocation to get to who they want to give it to. It was a battle to the extent that when he was nominated for ministerial post in this government, they didn't want to confirm him.
Okay, Mr. George, thank you very much, sir. I think the minister can, understand your import and where you're going. So, Minister,
again, I share with him his concerns, and based on previous experiences, but I can assure you, this loan is meant for Nigerians, and it's going to reach the targets. The president is so passionate about law that he will not allow any obstacles in it reaching the targeted beneficiaries, and even incorporated in the law itself, the national spread and of its benefits. And that is why even in the later version, the amended version of the law, skills have been incorporated into it. So it's not just available to those in tertiary institutions, but even those who are going through short-term skills programs in approved skill training centers. So for certain, students' loan will be available to those who apply and who are eligible and who need it. The president has said it emphatically that he does not want to see any child, any Nigerian citizen not going to school because of poverty. And
okay, we're going to have to leave it there, Minister. I beg your pardon. Forgive me, Minister, for my rudeness in jumping in from time to time, but the clock is really counting down. So do please forgive my the way I interject sometimes. But let me end with this particular question, which concerns us as Nigerians. Communication ability and skills in the language of instruction. We are Nigerians. How importantly are you taking that? We're talking about rural areas. You know the kind of way we are. Is the sole language of instruction English? And if it is not going to be English, this whole matter about ability and skills in the language of instruction, is that very important in the policies that you are working on?
Well, it is actually already in the law. You see, a lot of times we have this bit of inability to look at the instruments around us. The law, that law I mentioned earlier on, said instruction at that level, pre-primary and primary school can be conducted in the language of that area. That is what that law says. But of course, the key challenge will be the diversity of our country and our communities, and then which, if you, for instance, a particular local government decides to use a particular language, of course, where there is some level of consensus about the language, they can do that. The law allows it, honestly. So they can use it both from that level, and then as progressive as they develop, English language will now become the language of instruction. So there's a legal provision for it. So it's a question of the practicality and the politics of it. That's just the only issue that we have to address.
Okay then. Well, Minister, there's so many questions. You can imagine education concerns everybody, but we've run out of time. And so we would like to register our appreciation for your making time to come on our program today and telling us about efforts at fixing the education sector. I certainly wish you well, but you have indicated that there is much work to be done. Thank you very much for coming on our program, Minister.
Thank you. Much appreciated.
All right, then. Okay, so we're going to have to leave it there then. This is our program. We're going to have to leave our program today. Please do join us tomorrow for a fresh edition. I am Yori Folarin. Bye-bye for now.